They say humiliation has a sound, not just the sting of words, but the echo of laughter that clings to you, chasing you down even after the music stops and the night ends. I never believed that until the day my own daughter, my Jasmine, made me her punchline. It was her wedding day. The kind of grand event most mothers dream of for their daughters. The ballroom was draped in white roses and cascading lilies, the tables covered with silverware that gleamed under chandeliers brighter than the sun. A quartet played in the corner, their bows gliding smoothly over violin strings, every note polished and elegant. Waiters in tuxedos floated between the tables carrying trays of champagne, and laughter bubbled like the fine wine filling those fragile crystal glasses. It was a world I didn't belong in. Still, I tried. I had spent hours getting ready. I wore a pale lavender dress, chosen because it hid the weight I'd carried for years. My hair, streaked with gray, was pinned back as neatly as I could manage. My shoes, secondhand but polished until they gleamed, pinched at my toes, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to look presentable, to look like I belonged, even if deep down, I knew I never really would. I clutched the small gift in my hands, a carefully wrapped box with a delicate ribbon tied at the top. It wasn't flashy, nothing compared to the diamonds and designer bags I saw paraded onto the gift table, but it was mine. A small token of love from a mother to her daughter on the biggest day of her life, and Jasmine was radiant. She stood across the room in her gown, shimmering like something out of a fairy tale. Her veil trailed behind her, pearls glistening in her hair. She was surrounded by friends, her new husband's family, people who carried themselves with the kind of confidence only money could buy. For a moment, I was proud. For a moment, I thought maybe all the sacrifices had been worth it. The years of working nights and weekends, of going without so Jasmine could have dance lessons, school trips, and the latest fashions. Maybe this was the payoff. And then I heard her laugh. High and clear, slicing through the music. "See that woman over there?" she said to her friends, tilting her champagne flute toward me. "That's my mother, the fat pig we all have to put up with." It was like being slapped in the face. For a second I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My body froze, my hand tightening around the little gift box until the wrapping paper crinkled. My cheeks burned hot, my ears roared with blood rushing through them, and I wished more than anything that the ground would open up and swallow me whole. The laughter spread. First her friends, then others nearby. Smirks, whispers, muffled chuckles hidden behind hands. Even some of the men, businessmen in their expensive suits, let out short, sharp laughs at my expense. I wanted to disappear, and yet, my daughter kept laughing. My Jasmine, the same girl I had carried on my back through rain when she was too tired to walk home. The girl I had sung to sleep while my hands were raw from scrubbing floors all day. The girl I had stood in line for hours to buy a second-hand prom dress because she wanted to look like a princess. Now she was the princess. And I was the embarrassment. I felt so heavy in that moment. Heavy in body, heavy in soul. Every pound on me felt like it doubled under their stares. Every wrinkle, every gray hair screamed that I was old, ugly, out of place. But then, something shifted. The laughter around me faded. Not all at once, but slowly, like a ripple dying out. People's faces changed. Their smirks flattened into confusion. Their giggles stalled into silence. And it was because of one man. He stood near the head table, tall and broad, his suit tailored to perfection. His salt and pepper hair caught the light, his glass of champagne frozen halfway to his lips. Mr. Sterling, the groom's father. His laughter had been the loudest at first. But now he wasn't laughing. He was staring at me, hard. His brow furrowed, his lips parted. His eyes flickered like he was trying to place me, like he had seen me before. His hand trembled so slightly I thought he might drop his glass. And then he whispered, though the room was quiet enough that everyone near him heard. "Wait, isn't that my boss?" The word sliced through the air. Boss. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one spoke. You could have heard the chandeliers creak overhead in the silence that followed. Me? His boss? The murmur started immediately, whispers flying from table to table, people shifting in their chairs, craning their necks to see me more clearly. Even Jasmine's smile faltered, her painted lips twitching as confusion and unease crept into her face. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. I hadn't wanted this. Not here, not like this. But it was too late now. Because what no one knew, not my daughter, not her groom, not her father-in-law, was that I wasn't just Eleanor Baines, the overweight widow who had spent decades cleaning other people's offices. I was also E.J. Beaumont, the mysterious investor who had been quietly buying up companies for years. The unseen hand behind portfolios and stock movements that shook boardrooms. And just 2 weeks earlier, I had signed the papers making me the majority shareholder of Sterling Corporation, Mr. Sterling's company. The same man who was now staring at me with dawning horror and recognition. He fumbled with his phone, scrolling frantically through old emails, his thumb trembling. Then he froze. He looked up, his face pale, his jaw tight. "My God," he whispered again, this time louder. "You're the one who bought my company." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shocked voices colliding with one another. Chairs scraped as people stood to see better. The string quartet faltered mid-note. And Jasmine, my Jasmine, stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Her face drained of color, her mouth falling open. Mr. Sterling set his glass down and straightened. Then, before 200 stunned guests, he stepped forward and gave a small bow. To me, I didn't bow back. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, I felt tall, taller than I had ever been. But before I tell you what happened after that, you need to understand how I got here. Because I wasn't always E.J. Beaumont. I wasn't always the woman who could command respect from the richest men in the room. For most of my life, I was invisible. I was the woman who scrubbed floors while others slept. The woman who rode 3 buses across town in shoes with holes in them, just to clean offices no one would notice were spotless until they weren't. I was the widow who counted pennies at the grocery store, the mother who skipped meals so her daughter could eat more, the person people saw through like glass. That's where my story really begins. Because you need to know how humiliation and sacrifice turned into power, how silence became a voice, and how a mother, mocked by her own child, became the millionaire no one saw coming. And trust me, this is just the beginning. When Mr. Sterling's words cut through that glittering ballroom, "You're the one who bought my company," I saw 200 eyes burn into me with a new intensity. The whispers, the gasps, the confusion. It was a storm, and I was the lightning bolt that had struck right in the middle of Jasmine's perfect day. But before I explain what happened next, you need to know where I came from. Because if you only saw me standing there, dressed in a lavender gown, clutching a crumpled gift box, you'd never believe the road I walked to get there. I wasn't born into money. I was born into struggle. My earliest memory is of my mother counting coins at the kitchen table. The house smelled of boiled cabbage because that was all we could afford most nights. My father was gone before I turned 6. He didn't die, he left. One day he was there, the next day he was gone, leaving behind only the smell of whiskey and a hollow ache in my mother's chest. So I learned early what abandonment felt like. And I swore that when I had children of my own, I would never, ever let them feel that. I met Harold when I was 20. He was kind, hard-working, and he laughed like life was a joke only he knew the punchline to. We didn't have much, but we had love. We had dreams. He wanted to open his own auto shop. I wanted a little house with a garden and maybe 2 kids. We never got the house or the garden, but we did get one child, Jasmine. She was born on a cold winter night, screaming her way into the world with fists clenched tight. I looked at her tiny face so fragile, and I made a silent vow. I would protect her, provide for her, love her so fiercely she'd never feel the emptiness my father left behind. But life has a way of testing vows. Harold got sick when Jasmine was 12. At first it was just fatigue, then the weight loss, then the diagnosis, pancreatic cancer. I begged God to take me instead, but he didn't. 6 months later, I was a widow. I buried the love of my life, and I stood at the graveside with a daughter whose eyes were too young to know that kind of grief. From then on, it was just us. I worked. Lord, how I worked. Cleaning jobs, mostly. Offices downtown where the lights never seemed to go out. I'd scrub floors until my knees ached, polish conference tables until I could see my own tired reflection staring back at me. Sometimes I'd take Jasmine with me when I couldn't afford a sitter. She'd sit in a chair in the lobby, doing her homework under fluorescent lights while I emptied trash bins. I told myself it was temporary. That one day things would get better, that all this sacrifice would be worth it. But Jasmine didn't see sacrifice. She saw shame. By the time she was in high school, she hated it when I picked her up from dance class in my faded uniform. She'd beg me to park around the corner so her friends wouldn't see. Once, I overheard her telling someone that her mother worked in an office, and though the words were technically true, the lie stung. I didn't correct her. I just swallowed the hurt and worked harder, because while I was scrubbing and mopping, I was also listening. Executives talk. They forget the cleaner is in the room. They talk about stocks, mergers, investments. At first, the words were nonsense, a language I didn't understand. But I had always been a quick study. I started writing things down. Ticker symbols, company names, terms I didn't know. I'd go home, put Jasmine to bed, and sit up with borrowed library books, teaching myself what those men took for granted. It became an obsession. I opened my first brokerage account with $50. That was grocery money, but I risked it. When I saw it grow to 65, I cried. Not because of the money itself, but because for the first time, I saw a way out. Over the years, I turned pennies into hundreds, hundreds into thousands. Every spare dime went into investments. I studied financial reports like scripture, reading until my eyes blurred. I made mistakes, of course. Lost money, cursed myself. But I learned, and slowly, I built something no one could see. To the world, I was still Eleanor, the cleaning lady. To my daughter, I was still the embarrassment. But secretly, I was building an empire brick by brick, dollar by dollar. And Jasmine never knew. She only saw the tired woman who came home late, who couldn't afford brand new sneakers, who packed peanut butter sandwiches instead of lunch money. She didn't see the portfolio growing in the shadows, or the woman teaching herself how to become more than life had allowed her to be. By the time Jasmine graduated college, I was already worth millions. I could have told her then, could have lifted the veil and shown her who I had become, but I didn't, because I wanted her to love me for me, not for what I had. And maybe that was my mistake, because instead of gratitude, Jasmine grew bitter. She wanted the life her friends had. She wanted designer clothes, flashy cars, expensive vacations. She didn't want to be reminded of the years we'd scraped by. And when she met her fiancé, a man from money, she saw her chance to escape me completely. I could feel it in the months leading up to the wedding. She called less, visited rarely. When we did speak, she was sharp, impatient. "Don't embarrass me," she'd snap when I asked about the wedding plans. "Just wear something simple and sit quietly." It hurt. God, it hurt. But I told myself it was stress. That every bride was difficult before her wedding. That once the day came, she would look at me and remember everything I'd done for her. But instead, on that glittering night, she looked at me and called me a fat pig. And in that moment, as the laughter echoed and my heart cracked wide open, I realized my silence had cost me more than I ever knew, because I had given her everything. And she had learned nothing. Still, fate has a way of turning. Because while Jasmine mocked me, her father-in-law stared at me with growing recognition. And when he called me boss in front of everyone, the balance of power shifted so fast it made the chandeliers sway. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to him. Not to Jasmine. Not to anyone. But being seen comes with its own kind of danger. And what happened after that night would test me in ways I never imagined. The moment Mr. Sterling bowed his head to me, the ballroom transformed. The hush that had fallen after his trembling words, "You're the one who bought my company," exploded into chaos. Gasps, whispers, murmurs rolling like thunder through the hall. Heads turning, necks craning, voices overlapping. "Did you hear that? She's the owner? That's her? That's E.J. Beaumont?" I stood frozen, clutching my little gift box so tightly the ribbon cut into my palm. For decades I had been invisible, dismissed, pitied. Now 200 people looked at me with wide eyes, not of mockery but of awe and fear. And Jasmine, my daughter, looked like the floor had just given way beneath her. Her lips parted, her smile broken. She swayed in her gown, suddenly unsure of her footing. Her eyes darted between me and her father-in-law, searching for answers, for an escape. What? She stammered, her voice small, trembling. That's not true. But her words were drowned by Mr. Sterling stepping forward. His voice, usually booming with confidence, was strained, deferential. Mrs. Baines, he began, then stopped. He corrected himself, his tone reverent now. Miss Beaumont, forgive me, I didn't realize. Every head turned back to me. Jasmine's groom, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, paled visibly. His posture shifted, no longer relaxed and proud, but stiff, wary. His hand slipped nervously from Jasmine's waist. For the first time that night, he looked at me not as a burden he had been forced to tolerate, but as someone whose power far outweighed his own. I wanted to say something. My lips parted, but no sound came out. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat echoing louder than the murmurs around me. Because here it was, the moment I had never asked for, never wanted like this. My secret, my years of work, laid bare not through my choice, but through humiliation turned on its head. Jasmine's eyes burned into mine. I saw rage there, but also panic. Her carefully crafted world was cracking, and she didn't know how to hold it together. Mom, she whispered sharply, her voice almost hissing. What is he talking about? But before I could answer, Mr. Sterling did it for me. Your mother, he said loudly, turning toward the crowd as though he wanted the entire room to hear, is the reason Sterling Corporation still exists. She didn't just buy shares, she bought me out. I work for her now. The words struck like a hammer. The groom's mother, a woman with diamond earrings that sparkled like icicles, gasped so loudly it silenced those nearest her. Her hand flew to her chest, eyes darting toward Jasmine like she had just married her son into a ticking bomb. And Jasmine herself. Her knees buckled. The strong, defiant bride who moments ago had laughed at me was suddenly clutching the edge of the table for balance. That's impossible, she stammered. She's nothing. She cleans offices, her voice cracked, faltered. Because even she could see the truth written across Mr. Sterling's face. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. For years, I had dreamed of a moment when the world would see me, not as a burden, not as a joke, but as the woman I truly was. But standing there, with my daughter crumbling before me, all I felt was heartbreak. Because Jasmine wasn't just humiliated, she was exposed, not just to her in-laws but to herself, and the worst part? I could see in her eyes that instead of regret, instead of shame for what she had said about me, her only thought was, how could you hide this from me? The guests began to stir. Some whispered eagerly, scandal gleaming in their eyes. Others shifted uncomfortably, not sure if they should approach me or keep their distance. Then, slowly, people began to move. A man in a suit too tight at the shoulders stood and came toward me. He introduced himself nervously, shaking my hand with both of his like I was royalty. Then another followed. And another. Within minutes, I was surrounded. Questions flying at me, about business, about investments, about opportunities. For so long I had been overlooked. Now I was being smothered with attention. And Jasmine, she stood off to the side, abandoned. Her friends whispered behind manicured hands, their eyes wide as they stared at me like I was some rare gem unearthed from dirt. The laughter that had once flowed so easily from their mouths was gone, replaced by envy and unease. The groom's mother tugged her son's sleeve, hissing into his ear. I didn't catch the words, but I saw the fear in her eyes. This marriage, the alliance she had been so proud of, suddenly looked dangerous. Finally, Jasmine snapped. Enough, she cried, her voice shrill, cutting through the chatter. All eyes turned to her, but not in admiration. In irritation. In pity. She pointed at me, her hand trembling. She's a liar. She's been hiding this, pretending to be poor, making me suffer. Her voice cracked again, her chest heaving. You all don't know her like I do. She's pathetic. Enough, Jasmine. The words didn't come from me. They came from her groom. His voice was low, cold. The way he looked at her in that moment made her falter. He wasn't defending her. He wasn't laughing with her. He was looking at her like he didn't recognize the woman standing beside him. And in that silence, heavy and cutting, I finally found my voice. "I never hid from you." "Jasmine," I said softly but clearly, "I gave you everything. Every dollar I made went into making your life better. Every night I spent studying, investing, learning. It was for you. I wanted you to be proud of me. Not for money, for who I was. But I see now. Nothing I gave was ever enough." Her face twisted, caught between rage and despair. You humiliated me." I shook my head. "No, Jasmine, you did that all on your own." The silence that followed was unbearable. My chest ached, my throat burned. I wanted to cry, to scream, to run, but I didn't. I stood there, finally tall, finally unafraid. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced at Jasmine with judgment in their eyes. Others looked at me with newfound respect. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, his voice careful. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "perhaps we should continue the celebration. Tonight is, after all, about family." But the word family hung in the air like a cruel joke. Because whatever family I thought I had left was gone. Jasmine turned away from me, her shoulders trembling. The groom's hand hovered at her back, uncertain whether to comfort her or recoil. And I stood alone, surrounded by strangers who suddenly wanted to know me, while the one person I had sacrificed everything for had never felt further away. Still, I wasn't finished, because that night, beneath the chandeliers and the whispers, I made a silent vow. If my daughter wanted to see me as an enemy, so be it. If she wanted to throw away the bond we once had, I couldn't stop her. But I would not shrink again. I had spent a lifetime invisible. That part of me was gone forever, and what came next, no one in that room was ready for. When the music stuttered back to life and the band nervously tried to coax the room into celebration again, I felt like I was standing in a storm without shelter. Glittering chandeliers above, champagne flutes clinking faintly, but under it all, the tension was unbearable. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew sharper. Every time I caught a pair of eyes, they darted away, but not before I heard fragments. "The mother's the millionaire." "Did you see the way the bride screamed?" What kind of daughter says that in public? Jasmine had disappeared midway through the dancing. I saw the swish of her gown vanish through a side corridor, her groom following reluctantly. And me? I stayed, a strange magnet for strangers who suddenly wanted my advice about stocks or offers of partnerships. Their voices blurred together until it was all just noise, because the only voice I wanted to hear, the only one that mattered, was silent. My daughter hadn't looked at me again since she spat those words. "You humiliated me." By the time dessert was served, I excused myself. My chest was too heavy, my throat raw from holding back tears. I slipped out of the ballroom and followed the faint echo of voices down the hallway. I found them in a side lounge, away from the crowd. Jasmine stood with her back rigid, hands on her hips, eyes wild. Her groom sat slouched on a velvet armchair, head in his hands. And standing between them like a referee was Mrs. Sterling, his mother. Her lips thin, her face pale but sharp as cut glass. They didn't notice me at first. "I told you," Mrs. Sterling hissed at her son. "This marriage was about alliances. About image. Do you realize what a circus this has become?" Jasmine whirled on her. "Don't you dare put this on me. How was I supposed to know she was hiding millions?" Her voice cracked shrill. She looked less like a bride and more like a child caught lying. The groom groaned, dragging his hands down his face. "Jasmine, for God's sake, do you hear yourself? Your mother she just flipped the entire room, and you insulted her in front of everyone. She deserved it," Jasmine shot back. "She's been lying to me, lying to all of us. She let me walk around embarrassed of her, ashamed of her, when she could have told me the truth. She could have saved me from all of this." Her voice splintered, and for the first time, I saw tears at the corners of her eyes. And that's when I stepped forward. My shoes clicked softly on the marble, and the sound made all three heads turn. "Saved you from what, Jasmine?" I asked quietly. She froze. Her groom stiffened, sitting upright. Mrs. Sterling's eyes narrowed, studying me like a hawk. Jasmine's face crumpled into something desperate, almost pleading. but her words came out twisted. From being laughed at, from being the daughter of a nobody while everyone else. Her voice faltered, caught in the lie. Because she couldn't say it now. Not when she knew the truth. I stepped closer. I was never a nobody, Jasmine. Not to you. At least I thought I wasn't. The silence that followed cut deeper than any words could. Her shoulders trembled, but she refused to meet my eyes. The groom finally stood, smoothing his suit, his expression conflicted. Mrs. Beaumont, he said stiffly, like he wasn't sure whether to call me Eleanor or treat me like an investor. I want you to know, despite what happened, I respect you. Deeply. I almost laughed. Respect. From the boy who had laughed at my old dress shoes just a week ago. But it wasn't respect I wanted. It wasn't his approval or his family's. It was my daughter's love. And that, I realized as I looked at her tear-streaked face, was gone. Mrs. Sterling finally spoke, her words slow, precise. We will do damage control, she said. This scandal, if handled correctly, can even be turned in our favor. But Jasmine, she turned on her, her tone icy. You will need to repair your relationship with your mother. At least publicly. Jasmine's head snapped up. What? No! I won't. You will. Mrs. Sterling cut her off. If you want this marriage to remain intact, if you want to remain in this family, the implication was clear. My daughter, on her wedding night, was being told she might not even last the week as Mrs. Sterling. The groom's face hardened, shame flashing across his features. He muttered something under his breath, then excused himself, storming out of the lounge. That left the three of us, me, Jasmine, and the steel-eyed matriarch. Mrs. Sterling looked at me, her smile thin and brittle. Ms. Beaumont, she said softly, I trust you'll see to it that your daughter behaves appropriately. And then she, too, swept out, her perfume lingering like a warning. For a long moment, Jasmine and I stood alone. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths. Her fists clenched at her sides. And finally, she looked at me, not with pride, not with love, but with venom. You ruined everything, she whispered. Everything, I shook my head slowly. No, Jasmine. I gave you everything. You're the one who decided it wasn't enough. Her lips trembled. For a moment, I thought I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She spun on her heel and stormed out, her train dragging behind her like a shadow. And just like that, my daughter was gone. I sank into the chair her groom had left, the velvet swallowing me whole. My hands trembled in my lap. I had faced boardrooms full of powerful men, negotiated contracts worth millions, built an empire from scratch. But I had never felt so utterly defeated, because money couldn't buy me what I wanted most. My daughter's love. And as I sat there in that gilded lounge, the muffled sound of laughter drifting from the ballroom, I realized this was only the beginning. The fallout from tonight would not end here. Secrets once revealed have a way of growing roots, twisting deeper, dragging everything with them. And Jasmine wasn't finished with me. Not by a long shot. The days after the wedding crawled by like years. My phone, usually quiet, was flooded. Business acquaintances, old colleagues, even neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to catch up. My name appeared in trade publications, whispered on investment blogs. The revelation that Eleanor Baines, the overweight cleaning lady, as one cruel gossip site labeled me, was in fact E.J. Beaumont, silent powerhouse investor, had ignited a storm. But in the middle of all that noise, silence from Jasmine, not a single call, not a message, not even a note. The daughter who used to text me daily in college, even if it was just send money, was now a ghost. For 3 nights I barely slept. I replayed every moment of the wedding in my mind. Her laughter with her friends, her sneer when she called me a pig, the horror on her face when her father-in-law exposed me. And worst of all, the way she looked at me in that lounge, like I was her enemy. I told myself to let it go, that she was newly married, overwhelmed, probably embarrassed. She needed time, but by the 5th night the silence was unbearable. I found myself driving across town, past glittering stores and polished cars, to the sprawling Sterling estate where she now lived. The gate swung open reluctantly after I pressed the intercom. The guard's eyes lingered on me longer than I liked, as though trying to reconcile the millionaire on the news with the weary woman behind the wheel. I parked, stepped out, and stood before the grand doors. My hands trembled, not from fear of the Sterlings, but from fear of what I might find inside. A maid led me through marble corridors into a drawing room where Jasmine sat curled on a sofa, her gown replaced by silk loungewear. She looked tired, her eyes swollen from crying. Yet when she saw me, her face hardened instantly. "Oh," she said coldly. "You," my heart squeezed. That one word, "you," held more venom than 1,000 insults. "Jasmine," I whispered. "I came to what?" She snapped, standing abruptly. "To gloat? To tell me how I embarrassed myself in front of everyone? To remind me that you were the secret star of my wedding while I was left looking like a fool?" Her words struck like knives. "No," I said softly. "I came because I'm your mother. Because I love you." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "Love? Is that what you call lying to me for years? Hiding your money? Making me ashamed of you when you could have—" "I didn't hide it to punish you," I interrupted, my voice breaking. "I wanted you to grow up knowing the value of people, not just wealth. I wanted you to respect hard work, kindness, decency, not just money." She shook her head violently, tears springing to her eyes. "Well, congratulations, Mother. I learned exactly the opposite. I learned that without money, you're nothing. You're laughed at, humiliated, just like I was. Just like you let me be." Her words left me breathless. She truly believed that. My daughter, the child I had rocked to sleep, who once pressed dandelions into my hand and called me her hero, had been poisoned by the world around her, and maybe by me, too. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Jasmine. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was wrong." Her lips trembled. For a heartbeat, I thought she might collapse into my arms, that the years of love between us might resurface, but instead she turned away. "I can't do this," she said flatly. "The Sterlings are furious. My husband barely looks at me. Do you know what they said? That the only reason they'll tolerate me now is because of you. Because of your money." She spun back, her eyes blazing. "Do you know what that feels like? To realize even your marriage isn't about you, but about someone else's fortune." I stepped closer, my voice low, aching. "Jasmine, you're not trapped. If you're unhappy, you can walk away. You have your own strength. You don't need their approval. You don't need mine. You don't need—" "Yes, I do!" she screamed, her voice shattering. "Don't you get it? I can't live without it. Without the money, the image, the respect. I can't go back to being the girl everyone whispered about." "I won't!" Her sobs shook her body. And I realized then, this wasn't just pride. This was fear. Fear of being small. Fear of being laughed at. Fear of being me. For the first time in my life, I saw my daughter not as the arrogant bride, not as the cruel voice that called me a pig, but as a terrified little girl, clinging to illusions because the truth was too painful. I reached for her. My hands trembled as I touched her shoulder. "Jasmine," I whispered, tears rolling down my cheeks. "I would give you everything. I already have. But the one thing I can't give you is self-respect. You have to choose that for yourself." She flinched, pulling away from my touch. "Get out," she whispered. Her voice was soft, broken. "Please, just go." I stood there, my heart cracking open. My lips parted, desperate to say something, anything that might heal the rift. But the look in her eyes told me the truth. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be, so I turned. My footsteps echoed in the grand empty hall. Each one felt like leaving pieces of my heart behind. At the door I paused. My voice trembled, but I forced it out. "I'll always love you, Jasmine. Even if you hate me, even if you never speak to me again, you'll always be my daughter. And I'll always be here, if you ever decide you need me." And then I walked out. The night air outside was cool, sharp against my wet cheeks. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. For the first time in years, I felt like all the millions in the world were nothing, because money could rebuild companies, buy houses, silence critics. But it could not mend a daughter's heart. It could not mend mine. As I drove away, the mansion lights fading in the distance, I whispered a prayer. Not for myself, for Jasmine, that someday she would see past the glitter, the gossip, the greed, that someday she would remember the mother who once kissed her scraped knees and braided her hair for school. That someday she would forgive me. Until then, I had to live with the truth. My daughter called me a fat pig at her wedding, and though the world now knew me as the millionaire in the room, in her eyes, I had never been smaller. But life is strange. Sometimes the deepest pain carries the strongest lesson. And mine was this. You can give your children everything, money, opportunities, even sacrifice your own dignity. But the one thing you cannot control is the heart they choose to carry. Some will choose pride. Some will choose love. I only hope one day my Jasmine chooses love.